Welcome to another episode of the Wealthy Podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Nairos, and today we are welcoming James Addington to the program. James is, how do you describe James Addington? James is an entrepreneur. He's been very active in the hospitality business in the Central Okanagan. But the reason we're talking to James today is because he has lived experience with mental health and is now on a journey to share his story so that he may support, help, and provide a voice for those in our community, especially men who may be struggling with their own mental health. It's an important conversation. I hope you enjoy it. All right, here we go. Today on the Wealthy Podcast, we are welcoming James Addington. James is not just a promising entrepreneur and well-known in Kelowna's hospitality circles. He is an advocate for men's mental health and someone who is bravely sharing his own struggles to help shed light on a topic that, in the past, was not often talked about. James's think piece, A Feminine Man in a Masculine World, has been praised for exploring complicated themes of gender and sexual identity, depression, anxiety, addiction, and belonging at a time when it seems like many men are truly struggling to find their place. James has been a committed and vocal advocate for men's mental health, and I'm really interested in learning more from him about his lived experience with his own mental health and the mission he's on. So welcome, James.
Thanks, Shauna. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So we have a bit of an opening tradition on the podcast. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about how you became interested in mental health and perhaps an early memory or experience of how healthcare or mental health care had an impact on you or someone close to you.
For sure. I remember I was probably in kindergarten, grade 1, and I remember sitting at the side of the playground just sobbing, and I had no idea why. And now in my day, when I look back to that, I understand maybe not why, but what I had started that journey, and that's my mental health journey started that young. And I never thought I would get past the age of 10, and then I never thought I'd get past the age of 16, and then I always had things that were setting life to continue, and that's a weird feeling to say. But now at 40 years old, I'm here. I'm still alive, which is a feat, and I feel like I'm starting my journey the fullest it has been in the last few years. So that's the most exciting part.
So tell me about that little boy. So if you can, I know it's sometimes hard to go back there, but I think it really gives context to the conversation that we're going to have.
Definitely.
Obviously, when you're that young, you don't really know, like you said, why you're sad or what it is about the interactions or the experiences that you're having that is affecting you so deeply. But one thing that we do know about people who sometimes struggle with their mental well-being is that they're really sensitive.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing in many cases, but in many cases it's a tough thing. So what, in retrospect, what do you think you were sensitive to as a little boy?
I think I was sensitive to the voice in my head. I call him Frank now. He's my friend.
Oh,
but
wow. We've named him.
Yeah, he's pretty funny.
Okay. He's funny.
He won't come out today, but it was that voice in your head that you didn't know. And it was the constant questioning of yourself. And it started at a young age of that. And I remember many days not wanting to go to school. And I remember I'd rather sit at home and watch Wheel of Fortune and The Price is Right. And I was pretty good at The Price is Right by the age of 10. But yeah, that anxiety of, I don't know, the anxiety of life or the anxiety of that voice in my head that was always talking to me, always questioning myself, was where it really started. And that's what continued for a long, long time. And as we get into today, and obviously some prep into the questions, and as we kind of talk about some stuff, quieting that voice is when I really took control of my mental health. And now ever so more, I feel like, having a voice in the last 5-10 years wasn't accepted. And we can talk about that later as well. But really focusing on kids in this part is kind of where I believe we have to go back to. And like, my generation isn't going to change mental health. We're going to start the conversation, but it's going to be that kid in, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 that, they're talking about it. It's a conversation in their world, and they're the ones that are going to be able to make the change. And that's what I truly believe. And as, I was at a Mine and Dine with the KGH, and that was the major topic, was children are going to have the biggest effect, but we have to start and continue the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to know, we'll get to this, but your sort of hope for the future.
Yeah.
And, there's a little James somewhere sitting in a playground,
100%.
sad. And,
There is.
I think we'll wind our way around to that.
And they don't know why. But they, and we'll go with they have the ability now to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to bring up that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like I said, 5-10 years ago, it still wasn't okay. And I'll talk about that too, because that was a huge change in my journey, is when I started to talk, how it isolated me for many, many years. But now, like I say in the piece that we'll talk about, Modern Man, there's nothing that anyone can say about me that I haven't already said about myself. So come at me. That's the wrong approach, but I'm okay. It's real.
It's the self-acceptance piece.
Yes, that's
right?
a great word. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the mission you're on?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this mission. I wouldn't really say it's a mission. I would say there's some hope in just starting conversation, or continuing to start conversation, and to see the change in what I can affect, which is me, first of all, and the people that are in my world, right? I'm not here to change the world. I think that's not even a place to start of anything. But I do hope to have an impact on the people in my life. And at work, that was a big one, right? We brought mental health to our restaurant, Pretty Not Bad. And that was one of our pillars of what we did. And bringing mental health into an organization and into a business puts a huge target on your back, because everyone is watching and waiting. And unfortunately, and I've been listening to a different podcast, The Subtle Art. I can't say the next word. So The Subtle Art, and this gentleman.
I'm not giving a
that one.
Hoot.
A hoot and Hanny. Yeah. And when you do that, people are now using mental health as like, well, it's affecting my mental health. In business, the choices you made or the performance management you did is affecting my mental health. And that was a big, hard one to navigate.
It's like the dichotomy between recognizing the impact that experiences have on you personally, but also taking responsibility for how you show up.
You have to be accountable for yourself, and you have to do the work. But so like back to that of bringing it into the world of business was a very different thing. And I did years ago, and I wouldn't say my job changed because of it, but yeah, my job changed because of it. From a different piece that I brought up, and it was called the $10,000 belly. And it was the story of my journey, because I always thought my belly was worth 10 grand because I ate and drank whatever I wanted. And, it's the most important piece of my body. It's not anymore. It's probably worth more, but shows less, which is nice. But, yeah, Pretty Not Bad was one of the places that we brought it into the conversation of staff, and really wanted to create a place where people felt safe, both guests and staff, to have conversation.
How did you do that? I mean, because I worked in the hospitality business. It was a long time ago, but that's a big undertaking. So what were some of the strategies and the conversations that you had with your staff and your management?
It started with me being very vulnerable and open around my conversation and my experiences, and definitely not making it all about me. But we will talk about it. But this piece, a modern man, a feminine man in a masculine world, like that was a big piece. And when I started to read this, and I did it at one of the nights as well, and just sharing that and being open started the conversation. But then listening, right? You got to listen. You can't just talk at people all the time. I can talk for hours, but I can also listen really well. And, giving your staff the ability and chances to make mistakes, but also the ability to own up to their mistakes.
Without the fear of sort of retribution, as long as you're taking responsibility for...
Totally.
Yeah, we all make mistakes.
We all make mistakes. I've learned from it. That's the journey. So that's the mission. Maybe is that the mission, to make mistakes and learn and be better and just be a good person? Yeah, that's probably my mission. Just be a good person.
I love that.
Open doors for women, open doors for men. Just be a good person. It's not hard. Actually, it's very hard.
Well, it's sometimes hard in the world that we live in.
Yeah.
We've created a lot of, boxes that we put people in order to just sort of make meaning and organize our world in a certain way, right? So I think one of the things that I'm going to get into this written work that you've done, but what I feel like it does is it opens up space for like radical vulnerability. I mean, some of the things that you talk about in here are really, I think, so brave. I'm just gonna, if it's okay,
of course,
I'm gonna read a little bit of it, because I know that I think it's an important part of this conversation. I think for you, this has been a springboard for your activism in the mental health community.
Definitely has.
So it starts, a modern man, feminine man in a masculine world. It's almost written prosaically. The story of growing up to find yourself, sexuality and confidence, fear, depression, anxiety, suicide, high functioning addiction, bullied, holding an old narrative. All these words describe my journey as a boy to a man. However, this isn't what today is about. From the outside looking in, I have had everything going for me. However, perception is not reality, especially when going against the voices in your head. In my mind, I always questioned my sexuality. Was I meant to spend my life with a man? As most of my friends were women, I didn't know what a plus minus was or give two hoots. I never felt like I fit in with the boys, unless, of course, I was one-on-one with a dude. I questioned because of my love for fashion, for my sensitivity, my creative being, but most of all, I questioned myself. So what you've done here, and this piece goes on for another couple of pages, and it is really just a very beautiful, almost raw, vulnerable stream of consciousness. And I think you've articulated what a lot of people feel,
Thank you.
but don't often.
It's cool to hear someone
say.
talk about it, because
Yeah, you write it for you.
Yeah, I wrote it for me, for sure. Yeah.
Which is also novel, because then when it's spoken to audiences, when you write it for you with no consideration of like, maybe like, we think a lot about like, how does this impact the people that are listening to it? But you wrote this for you. But like I said, I think you've articulated a lot of the real struggles that all of us actually grapple with.
Yeah.
As we're coming into our adulthood. Right. So, tell me about like what motivated you to write this, and what has the response been?
I guess what motivated me to write that is, I went clinically insane. Like, I ended up in a mental institution in Regina, the best year of my life. And it was actually the tail end of my addiction on cocaine. And like I say in there, a highly functioning addict, right? Like, I was getting all the jobs. I was moving. Nobody knew, but they did know probably. But I only did it by myself, and I was never public about it. And then one day when I moved and I ran again, I ended up literally going, like, as they said, manic and insane. And ended up in a hospital in Regina for 5 years, 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, for 5 days. And when I got out, I was diagnosed with bipolar, and I was put on lithium, and I was put on antipsychotics. And, you know, I'm actually proud to say, and I had a good chat with my girlfriend last night about this, I'm proud to say I'm 2 and a bit months off of lithium. I got off the antipsychotic a couple years ago because, like, both of those together were, like, super mind altering, actually. Nothing against medication, and I'm not a doctor and all those things, I will say, but it helped me in a time when I needed it. But now doing the work differently, I don't need it. But it takes every day managing my bipolar to be okay.
Right.
But I'm strong enough to be able to do that. So I don't know. I don't think I actually answered that question.
No, you did. So continue.
I wrote it to just literally put it all on the table, right? And that voice in my head, the sexuality piece was a big one, right? Like 10 years ago, and I will try not to offend anyone in this, and I'm not politically correct in like all of those. All the different words I'm just not. I didn't grow up with that. But I grew up very confused because, you know, I could look at a guy and I'd be like, wow, he's good looking. And I'm not attracted to that person, but there is an attraction that I have. Never been with a man, have had men come on to me, have been confused, have felt that. So like that in my head was like the longest thing. Like I could not get that out forever. And like growing up and being on like a lot of different like medications and things and trying to fit in, like that was just like, why didn't I fit in? But I still did. And I was still a popular kid growing up in, you know, early days. I was a popular kid and, you know, was great at sports and did all these things. And, you know, then I moved to California and found marijuana and beer and, you know, wasn't, and then got kicked off my volleyball team. And, you know, like that journey of like trying to be a man was tough. Mm-hmm. And then you just, you know, you go into your head and then the depression and the anxiety continues, but mostly the depression. And you just kind of go silent, right? And the biggest piece as to why I spoke about it and why I went is when I moved back here after being in Regina. You know, even today I'm speaking very freely and there's no notes in that. There was a time for a good month or two where I didn't speak because I had to think about every single thing I was going to say before I said it. And that's a crazy feeling. And was that because you were afraid of being judged? Yeah, or just my brain. I was on so many. I didn't know what
was true and what wasn't.
I didn't, right? And so I went kind of mute and I went kind of like dark and I just kind of fell off the map for 3 to 6 months. And that was a very dark place. And I wasn't on like drugs. Like I wasn't using alcohol or cocaine at that time. Right. I was on highly, you know,
like pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah. And so as I started to get out of that and as I, you know, shared my journey mental health wise, you know, 2 years after that, it definitely wasn't accepted. People were like, why do you keep talking about this? No one wants to hear this. No one wants to hear about anxiety and depression. No one wants to hear about your mental health journey. I was like, okay, well, you don't have to listen then.
But it's for you,
but it's
part
for me.
Of your healing process.
Of course. And I actually use Instagram and, you know, some friends are like, James, you just keep sharing too much. You know, my girlfriend this morning, make sure you know that this is public. Don't share too much. So I won't share that story. But but I continued to do it. And I did it because it was an outlet for myself. I didn't care. And if someone wanted to listen, then they would listen. And if I could affect one man, woman, or child, and I say that, then great. That's all that matters. And then it started conversation. Then people started to write back and say, hey, appreciate you saying this. Men, women, my husband, I wish he could hear this. And it started conversation. And then I decided one day with Modern Man just to put it all on the table. Because at that point, I had nothing else. And to be honest, I had a business partner who allowed me in business to speak freely, because not a lot of people in the world, or my experiences past, were not allowed to speak freely on it.
Well, and particularly with some of the topics that you address in this piece, particularly I think around what I love about you is that you speak about men's mental health, and the questions that you're asking yourself or grappling with in this piece. Like I said, I think many men grapple with, regardless of how they are, their gender, how they identify gender-wise or sexuality, because it's different. I think what you're doing here is opening up doors for other people to feel safe with even just having those feelings and those thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really brave. We'll put a link to this in our notes. Do you think that the substance use was your way of coping
100%.
With some of these big things that you just didn't have the skills to
100%
unravel?
Yeah, like I just didn't want, it just would stop the brain, right?
Yeah.
And, I used to work like 12, 14, 16, like it didn't matter. In hospitality and hotels, like so thankful. Delta Hotels was a major part of supporting me when I went into hospital. And
really?
Yeah, hugely.
Was that your employer at the time?
It was, yeah. And, they helped me get onto short-term and then long-term disability, and they had great programs and they supported that. And I still am in contact with a lot of those people. And one the director of HR at the time, I reconnecting her as my life's changing a little bit again. But they helped me immensely, not worry about work. And that was a big piece, because work had defined who I was for those years. Because I moved with the company, I went anywhere they wanted, and I progressed so hard.
With Delta.
With Delta, and with hotels. And then, the substance abuse was the way to just stop that voice in your head and stop that mind and not to worry. And like I would go out and I'd be out and about and wasn't doing drugs, just drinking. And, I think we could talk about it. We're already talking about it. Yeah, cocaine has a way of resetting your mind when you're drinking too much.
Right.
And so like when I got to that point, I would just leave. And I would ghost and I would leave the bar and I'd go home and I would do it by myself. And unbeknownst to my girlfriend at the time, probably, and different things, or so I thought, right? And it would just blank the mind.
And that was like relief.
Yeah.
I think it's really helpful for people to hear that perspective, because addicts, there's a lot of stigma around it and a lot of, I think, misunderstanding. And what we're learning now is that substance use is often a way of trying to just keep yourself going. When, like you said, you have all these sort of voices in your head, all of these shame thoughts, it just sort of neutralizes.
100%. Yeah.
And then we can create some empathy for people that are going through that. When, like, you talk about masculinity and femininity in this piece, and gender identity, and your platform really is men's mental health. So I'm curious, like, when you talk about masculine versus feminine, like how do you define those two things, or how do you feel like the gender norms that you grow up with has sort of put those things in a box that didn't necessarily fit for you? That's like 5 questions in one, but I do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So
masculine.
a dress is feminine, right? And so
like just the gender norms, right?
Yeah. And like
what is feminine? What is masculine?
Yeah. I mean, I purely, I guess it's maybe easily as it is, it's a man and a woman. Mm-hmm. Men are masculine, women are feminine. Mm-hmm. But when you cross that line and you gravitate more towards women and not in like a sexual way, but like that's where your comfort is.
Yeah, like mannerisms or sensitivity.
I remember my sister and I would go shopping in the mall, and me and my dad would go off, and we would split, and we'd come back and we would have bought the same thing.
Oh, you and your sister.
We would have the same belt, and she would always be like, "Why? Like, why do you have like? Why would you even find that?"
Yeah,
and that's a funny joke because she loves that, but and it's. I guess I'm not even answering the question, other than the fact of like
did you
being sensitive or not being able to go and talk to guys about sports. Like I love sports. I played them all the time. I was quite good at them, but I couldn't talk sports. I didn't care whoever this guy is who last night had 30 points and today woke up and like it just was such a fantasy world that I couldn't live in. And so I wasn't a part of those conversations growing up.
Like you just didn't feel like you fit. Interesting.
Yeah. And that's why I say plus minus, right? Like in sports, you're plus. But now I own a sports bar, partner in a sports bar,
But women like sports too.
They do, and we really created Pretty Not Bad and sports around women. Because we wanted women to feel comfortable. And quite frankly, if you feel comfortable in a bar watching sports, then your husband is going to take you there.
Yeah.
And then we created kind of like a cool space for it to be there because, there's other places in the world where women don't feel comfortable going to watch sports. Mm-hmm. And to see a lot in this Olympics, what happened with the women in sports, like, man, like, and my girlfriend is great at sports. She always has been and played soccer in Tennessee and all that stuff. And, she's got that passion back to me, but women are changing the world, right? Like you ladies have a big voice and it's cool.
And so then what does that mean for men?
That men need to have the same voice.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can say that.
You can just say it, James.
Okay. The femininity, whatever that is, I feel has in some ways gone a bit too far.
Yeah, like the feminist,
like active, like yep. Yes, like
I don't think you're alone in feeling that.
And I'm not here to talk or fight that because I do believe, and they have every right to. But so does anyone. Anyone has the right to stand up for what they believe in, and anyone has the right to open their mouth and say what they want to say. If they do it in the right way. You're not here to, put anyone down or say the wrong thing or be, derogatory or any of this stuff. So, ladies have had to come and fight to get where they are. And I that's crazy to even say, but it's the reality.
But it's almost like it perhaps has gone a little too far that in the pursuit of equality, we're tearing down men. And now men have this identity crisis of like, is it okay to open a door for a woman? Is it okay? And that's I think that's really valid. I think that I would hope that the movement for women to be able to experience the world in a way that feels genuine and authentic and gives them the same opportunities as men, but doesn't have to be the same as men.
Right.
Doesn't take away from men. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you said it a lot better than I think, and that's what I think
that's what you're saying is that like in the process, it sort of left men like you and many others wondering, where do I fit into this?
Yeah. And that's where there's been like, and I support it, of kids growing up and being themselves, and, people were like, why do you dye your hair pink? Or why are you doing this? Or why are you doing that? Because they're just trying to fit in or trying to understand. And it like to understand all of that as a young person is wild.
Yeah.
And like, I literally, in this move, I got rid of a skirt. And I don't think we talked about this, but even said to my girlfriend, Cass, I was like, I threw the skirt out. She's like, why?
Like you had a skirt.
Yeah, I wore skirts a lot in public. And I went the most, like, not the most, but most recent, I went to Revelstoke. And I have this like long just skirt. It's cheetah print and it's flowy and, you know, and it's great.
Cheetah's the new black.
Yeah, and it's so comfy. Like there's something freeing about wearing a skirt.
Yeah,
obviously.
we know this.
Yeah, that's probably why you do it. But, you know, I had a puffy jacket on top and I had a sweater and a hat and a skirt. And I walked into a bar in Revelstoke and, you know, it's full of Eastern European men mostly.
Yeah.
And they were like, what are you doing? And at one point I took my shoes off and I said, I even paint my nails. And these guys were just floored. And they said, why? Why are you doing this? And I said, would you have ever talked to me if I wasn't wearing a skirt? And their response was absolutely not.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
You met me, we had a conversation, we started conversation, and it was because I was wearing a skirt.
Yeah.
And then I found out that we were born in the same town, or we did this or did that. So, you know, I did that to start conversation and to just be different or be myself or not care about what anyone ever said or thought or felt or whatever. But the major part was to start conversation. And, you know, I have put my foot in my mouth and I almost did there, but you did very beautifully of making it better and saying it correctly. But I'm okay to eat my words and I'm okay to admit when I'm wrong. So I do say sometimes things out of both sides of my mouth, but I will also respectfully know when I made a mistake, right?
Yeah.
And that's a part of having a voice, I think, too.
I think that's very genuine and authentic. And you know what? I will say this, and to anybody that is listening, what I love about you, James, is like, you know that like these conversations are complex and that there's an ever-changing language around all of these complex topics.
Yeah.
And yet you're still like, listen, I'm going to mess this up, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. And I will say this, I mess it up too. Mm-hmm. Everybody messes it up because we're all still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
The point is that you feel, I don't even know, like, do you feel safe having these conversations? Do you feel safe? I mean, you've put a modern man into the world. You're coming on this podcast. Mm-hmm. I know you've spoken at events with CMHA Kelowna and have put yourself out there. Do you feel safe yet? You know?
I don't feel like there's a hit on me anymore, but
yeah.
But I do feel safe, and I'm as we sort of started, and I'm in the crazy transition in my life, and a lot of people have a lot of conversation on what that is, and I'm okay. I am, and it's okay not to be okay, and that was a big thing that I went through, but I am okay. And I am probably in the best place of my life, even though to some looking in again, they'd be like, what are you doing? You're leaving all this career. You're doing something different, like all of that. But yeah, like I have the clearest mind ever. But that took a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And I've put in the work. And that's the thing with mental health. It's like you actually have to do it. You have to get up and you have to make your bed or you have to do these things, right? This manifestation of the world of like, I'm going to sit on my couch and manifest all these things are going to happen. No, it doesn't work like that. Mm-hmm. You have to train your intuition to organize your mind to understand how it's going to work, right? And just like you said earlier, like you had to make a major change in your life to allow those doors to close and others to open. And I do believe that. So I feel safe to go in my journey and to talk. But I've also learned that I have the power to be disliked, and not everyone's going to like me, and not everybody's not going to believe in what I have to say or want to have conversation. I'm okay with that. I'm okay. And I wasn't for a long time. And so when you people please, I remember saying to my therapist, I'm like, my mission in life is if I make everyone else happy, then I'll be happy. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to, and like, he's like, no, wrong. Doesn't work like that.
Well, because were you happy?
No, I was miserable. Yeah, 100%. Like, absolutely not. But I was doing the work to get to where I am today. And is happiness, like we could talk about what happiness means, but that's not very fun. But I'm content. I'm me. I'm okay. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that does make me happy.
I love what you said about I'm not for everybody.
Yeah.
Who is though?
Nobody. But
right.
We all try to be. And that's, and social media, all that stuff, whatever, like I don't know. I don't even know where my mind went there. It was probably going to go down a rabbit hole that we don't need to on social media.
But I think I get what you're saying. Like, I think social media is is probably one of those spaces where there is this tendency to want to put things out there that you think people believe about you or what you want to project to the world. But there's this consciousness around the people on the other end receiving it.
Yeah.
Right. We were actually just talking about that before you arrived. It's a strange situation because it might be authentic.
Yeah.
Or it might not be authentic. And I love for you that, we talk about this idea that I'm not for everyone. And I really think that's the unlock to that radical self-acceptance that you're talking about is like, I'm not for everyone and that's okay, but I'm going to be for me and I'm going to be myself. And then the people that I am for, those relationships are going to be safe and strong and built on something that isn't something that you have to maintain.
Right.
Like that's a lot of work to maintain superficial relationships where you're trying to be somebody you're not.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but
I think you did. And people try so hard to be accepted that when you're doing that, you're actually doing the opposite. Mm-hmm. Right. And like, I mean, we should, and if someone doesn't accept you, then that's okay. And then if they don't have the reason to, like, the ability to tell you why, then that's okay too. And I think I struggled with that for a long time. It's like, well, why don't you accept me? And why won't you tell me why you don't? Well, people don't speak that freely, right?
They don't. Maybe they don't feel safe,
right? Yeah. And I focus on that a lot of like, it's theirs in uncertainties or their issues in themselves. And it's not to say other people have issues and that's why they don't like me. No, we all have to do our own journey. We all have to do the work within ourselves. And I'm not here to bring that out in you. I'm doing mine. And just doing mine is hard enough.
Totally.
Yeah. So
we had a conversation. This is sort of random, but I think it actually like applies. My favorite flavor of ice cream, if I was ice cream, I would be chocolate chip mint. Hey, you remember this conversation, Carly? Yeah, we just had it yesterday.
Chocolate chip mint? Okay.
Chocolate chip mint. What would you be?
Mine's world-class chocolate.
World-class chocolate.
Yeah. Baskin Robbins. Remember when Baskin Robbins was a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ice cream cakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Baskin Robbins ice cream cake. World-class chocolate. Best one ever. Yeah.
So that's awesome.
And not because I'm world-class.
Oh, sure. That's just the name of the ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's my point, though. I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay, sure.
Is that chocolate chip mint and world-class chocolate isn't for everybody.
Yeah, fair.
Like, there are, Baskin Robbins, great example, like, hundreds of flavors of ice cream.
Wasn't that their motto, like 42 flavors or something?
Oh, okay, so maybe 42, but even still.
100, sorry.
Even still, right? It's like, it's like, I'm chocolate chip mint. You're world-class chocolate. The people that love world-class chocolate are just going to love world-class chocolate. So don't try to be chocolate chip mint.
Right.
Right? Like the chocolate chip mint lovers are going to love me. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but do you know what I'm saying? I think that's the radical acceptance piece that you're talking about. Is the only person that matters what flavor of ice cream you like is you.
Yeah.
And then everybody else that likes that too is going to be like, yeah, I like that. And then you don't have to be tiger tail or bubble gum or
Or you are those people, and then that's you, right?
Exactly.
And we're all just different flavors walking in the world.
You can be like, look at Buddy over there being bubblegum.
Yeah.
Not for me, but I respect you.
Yeah, and that guy's a bit crusty. He must be pistachio. Like, who knows, right? Like,
oh, but the salt and the sweet of the, I can respect the pistachio, right?
People love ice cream, eh?
People love ice cream, and also people love people. But I think people love people that are themselves. And it's hard when you don't have that love for yourself to find those kinds of, like you're talking about, the deep connections that really fuel us.
And I think that's a good transition, because it's okay to not love yourself, and it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to feel depressed. Suicide's a thing, and I'm gonna go there now because
please.
I feel like we talked about happiness and ice cream, and now we should talk about suicide. Great transition. Because those feelings are scary.
Yeah.
And I say it in there, like, I put a knife through a pillow and I was gonna jump on it. I wrote a letter and I was gonna drive my Jeep off a bridge. Like, I've felt what and I've had it where, like the noose around my neck, like, and to get to that point, to like have your mind go that far is unexplainable. And I can say, like, I'm 3 years without suicidal thoughts. I can say that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But there's other people that have jumped on that knife, or have pulled that noose, or have shot that gun, or have driven off that bridge. And that's super sad. And it's a reality. And people are like, you can't talk about that. Let's be honest. We have to. Because the stats are like, you can't stats about suicide. The stats in suicide are staggering. And like, I know we know
it's the number one, I'm going to mess this up, but it is the number one cause of death for young men.
Yeah.
Suicide.
And like, shivers. And like, and I know this, like, try not to like get emotional on it, but like, and this is what affects men, and this is what we don't. And like, it's okay to cry, and it's okay, like I said, when it's one-on-one, because a guy feels comfortable to talk to me about how they're feeling, or like, say I'm not okay today, and I say, okay, well, let's just sit here and do nothing, and like, it's fine. And having close people that have lost someone, and then that person then takes their life because they just lost that person, like, that's a reality. And that's a reality in the last month in like people's worlds very close to me. And every time I talk about suicide, people are like, you can't talk about it. I'm like, well, yeah, but when I do, someone's like, I just lost somebody, or I just lost somebody.
I think we've all had that experience.
And, I've lost a few people in my life, but death doesn't scare me because I don't understand it, because I always knew that if it got that bad, I would just take my own life, and that would be the end of it.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's like most people's biggest fear.
Yeah. But it was such a scapegoat, and it was like another thing of like not doing the work. It's like, okay, well, if it just gets too tough, you just end your life, and then you don't have to get past that mogul, or accomplish this, or deal with that, or talk about this, or accept yourself, or right?
All those really scary
And I think that those
things.
are why it's such a staggering, because life is hootin' tough. Like, we are living in a very tough world.
Yeah.
Very tough world.
And I agree with you. I do think it's important to underline that point that it is okay to not be okay. I think that's part of the problem, especially for men, to be able to say, like, I'm actually not okay. We filmed a 30-second spot for our mental health campaign, and it was basically, it's the highest viewed video that we have on YouTube. Like 30,000 views, something like that.
Congrats, that's awesome.
Oh, thank you. But the thing is, the point of it was, it's a young man in BNA, actually, and
that's such a powerful piece.
Yeah, have you seen it? Yeah. So they come, like, the camera comes in, he comes in, he sits down, and he's with a group of friends, and one of his friends says, "Hey, how have you been doing, Jesse?" And everything stops, and then you hear what's happening in his mind, and he's basically saying, "I'm not good. I haven't been good for a while. I have these thoughts. I'm not happy. I don't know what to do. And then everything starts moving in again. And he says, I'm good. Yeah, things are good. Why do you think men feel so like it's so difficult? I don't even think that phenomena is unique to men. I do think women struggle with that too. But I think men more have a hard time saying, I'm not good.
Yeah, and I need help. And I think someone saw that video, and I'm going to say that, and they created that one about the two guys at the football game, the soccer game. And it showed like the guy that was coming in, and you knew that in the end somebody was going to pass away, and you thought it was the guy that was like over drinking, over out, over this, over that.
But it was the one,
And it was the one that didn't say how they felt. Because to say it out loud, you have to accept it, right? You have to be able to do that. And yeah, like telling men you love them, right? And love is a big word, but you know, I tell my friends I love them because I do. And I care about them, and they have a part in my life.
Do you think it's hard for men to tell each other that they love you? Like,
it's becoming easier. Like, I end a lot of conversations with men and tell them that I love them, my close friends, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, women do it, I think.
And I did that with my dad. And like, you know, we grew up, and that was the way we ended the conversation. And I'll even say this, and she'll kill me, but that's okay. I told my girlfriend, who's now, that I loved her for a long time, and she didn't respond. And she didn't say it back. And in past worlds, people would be like, that's a huge red flag. Well, it wasn't, because I was already there. I felt all those things, and I did love her, and what I knew as love is what I was expressing and how I felt. But she wasn't ready for it yet. And that's okay. And it was a weird phenomenon, because I would say it and she wouldn't respond. And like, I would be like, okay. And I wait for the day that she was going to say it back. And
she was still there. So
she was still here, and she's still here. And one day, you know, we were at an event, and she took up a camera and she put it up in front, and I was like, what are you doing? And it's like recording. She's like, I wanted to tell you that I loved you. And I was like, okay. And like, I'm like, wait. And that moment was so special, and our life changed then. And I knew that she was all in, and I knew that I found a person that I can continue to be open and honest with. But it takes a lot of work, and the communication and the talking. But yeah, like our not even a first date, but she went with me to Mamas for Mamas gala, and I wore a full length black dress, gowned with a fur boa and like jewels. And she went there with me.
I love that.
And she would go have her own conversations as I was having conversations. And I've actually never been hit on by women more than that night wearing a dress in my entire life, which is hilarious.
Really?
Yeah, it was weird. They felt like they could grab your ass. So I kind of felt like, I don't know, it was weird. But yeah, I think love is a weird thing, but everyone has it in a different way, and it's okay to not feel it when you do, but it's just like being ready to talk about anything. You have to be ready to. But when it comes to mental health, you unfortunately just have to. When you feel like something is holding you back from saying it, that's when you actually have to say it. And that's different than love, because you have to feel those things. You have to believe in it for the future. But if you're not feeling okay, you have to tell somebody. You can't let those voices, you can't sit in it, you can't let it take away.
You can't do it by yourself.
Sure. And you can't let it take away from you or continue to eat at you.
Yeah.
Because eventually, that's why suicide rates are so high.
Yeah.
Because people just say, I can't do this anymore.
And I think they feel alone. And by telling somebody, you immediately create a different dynamic. How did you get out of that? So you're in that dark place. And now here you are 3 years later. I know it's not just all automatically like you flip a switch and it's like, oh, I'm not going to think like that anymore. That's not how it works. What made you choose to, I don't even know how to articulate this, go from like that really, really dark place to I want to live. Like I want to live and I'm going to do what it takes.
I think when you end up in a padded room naked by yourself and you try to escape that padded room and you're, try to escape a hospital and you have many people lift you up and put you in a padded room and you wake up that morning, you're like, oh shit. Like this.
But you could go either way.
100%
right?
You could. I guess I had the support of my family to see your father in tears and to see the effect that you have on that and starting to talk to your parents about it and letting them into your life, I think is where I went. And I started to do the work and I continued to journal and I put myself in uncomfortable conversations or in comfortable positions. I used to go to B&A by myself and my good friend would always let me in and I had my journal in my hand and I would go there. And that was when it's still an institution, let's be honest. Hello, Darling, or what it is called. How am I plugging somebody else's restaurant? But I love them so much, and they do such great things.
Oh, you mean like an institution? Like it is like
it's like
B&A the pinnacle.
It was, yeah. Like when it opened, but I would go there by myself with my journal, and I would journal by myself with the bar completely full.
Yeah.
And that was another way of creating conversation. People are like, "Oh, you're writing a book?" Like I'm like, "No, I'm just journaling." And they're like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
And like dudes would come up and be like, "Oh, like you're sitting by yourself in a full bar." I decided to do the work and I decided to get help and I had a life coach that did change my life. And so you have to start to talk to someone. And the biggest thing is I trained my intuition. I was the ability to go inside and go deep and have deep conversations, both with myself and with others, and to learn from that was the best piece. And that's, when anyone asks me for advice, I say two things. Journal, get it out of your mind, get it out of your head. And I have all my journals still. And like some of it is illegible. And it's funny when you open it and you go back and you still see that like 3 years ago, you're still struggling with the same thing. You're like, okay, I need to fix that. It's like my finances. I'm still struggling now with my finances and I have for years. And I've told myself to like not buy shoes, not do this, not just spend money. Right. But I still do.
Yeah.
Not as much anymore, but
we all struggle with that.
I love shoes. But I decided to do the work and I decided to continue. And as I saw progress, then it was right when your mind became clearer and you started to feel free. And then you wrote something like this that just like that did change my life 100% because I didn't have anything else to hide. I don't hide anything from anyone.
No.
Right. It's like your kids. Okay, just don't lie to me, James. Don't lie to me. Well, did you smoke pot? No, didn't smoke pot. Well, you smell like pot. You smell like cigarettes. You get in the car. They know. Did you smoke pot? No, Mom. Like when you stop lying.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing. I was lying to myself. I was lying who I was. I was trying to be someone else. I was all of those things.
That's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, I have been very fortunate to not have struggled deeply with mental health and the issues that you're talking about. But even for me, I made a commitment probably 20 years ago, like no lies.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It is hard.
But it's also so freeing because there's nothing to run from.
Right.
There's nothing to hide. You don't have to cover anything up. Right. And even that practice in and of itself is so transformative.
It is. And in relationships
Yes.
between men and women or men and men or women and women or however
universally,
like if you just don't lie to somebody and they ask you a question, you tell them the truth. Right. Like, and
Yes.
I brought that forth into this relationship. And that's why I think it's going so well is I don't have anything to hide. Right. Like I can leave my phone on the table. I could give it to her. I don't. And in past you do, and you don't know why. And like, it's like if exes listen to this, I didn't have anything to hide. You weren't okay with being so open.
You almost paint yourself into a box too, right? It's like once you start one little lie and then another little lie, and then, you know, if you're hiding, you know, you're doing cocaine by yourself at home, and like then you gotta, like, there's a cascade of little lies that have to cover that up, and then there's the shame around it, and it just compounds itself.
Yeah.
And the truth, it's so cliche, but it sets you free.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing about journaling. You mentioned journaling. I do think, you know, if there are young men listening to this that are struggling, or any age really, that are struggling with their mental health, I love this idea that you've put forward about journaling, because it's kind of like the same thing. Is like you don't. I don't know. I mean, I journal too, and I put it out there. It's for me, so I can tell the truth. It's the one area where you can just let it all out, and knowing that no one else, it's not for anyone else but you. It's how you practice telling yourself the truth.
Wow.
I don't know. Is it? Is that how it is for you?
It is. And as you're saying that, like, you know, all of these practices, I'm like, I can't remember the last time I journaled. Well, I can't remember the last time I told a lie. So there's nothing I need to get out of my head sometimes. And when I get into my head, I'm able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I have someone that looks at me and says, get out of your head. And you're like, well, I'm not it yet. Well, you are. So,
or even having someone that looks at you and says, I'm listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like sometimes we journal because there's no one else to listen.
Yeah. And a lot of those things are working through it. And I mean, you know, it's like I've gotten health. I call it the little burger. I love burgers. I love chicken. I love fried chicken. I love them on a burger. I love them on their own, but they don't love me. But yeah, like I can't even go and have a cheeseburger and not tell my partner that I had a cheeseburger. And she told me yesterday she had a Big Mac because it was $4 Big Mac day or something. And she's like, she was like, I just can't not tell you that I had one. Right. But what that brings is like, you know, I could eat cheeseburgers every day, and I did. And I ate meals over garbage cans because you're running and living that life in hospitality, and that's how you did. But now I don't want to live that life. But it didn't just happen. It wasn't just like, okay, all of a sudden it's going to change.
Yeah.
No, like I found things like spin, and I went 3 days a week, and I started to go, and I found a community of people that supported me and wanted to see me and were excited to, and it felt good. And I woke up some days not feeling like crap. And like, so, you know, it's again on that Subtle Art podcast and listening to that, they say like, why do we only do it? It's like believing in God. Well, I only talk to God when I need it. And it's like, I only listen to podcasts when I need them, and they're saying you need to do it all the time. I'm like, well, creating discipline doesn't just happen overnight, right?
No.
So when you reach for those things, it's because you need them, and they're tools. And yeah, you can make those tools more and more in your life all the time, but sometimes you just need those at that point. And your brain goes in other ways at other times, and it just is on autopilot.
But even for, you know, I think about like, we talk about little James, right? And didn't have any tools.
Right.
And I think what you're doing now is really admirable because, and I can hear like you're so genuinely wanting to help other people through sharing your story. And what you've articulated is like the way that you do that is incrementally, one step at a time, get the tools that you need in your toolkit and find somebody that you can trust. You know, I'm so sad because I have to wrap this up.
Some boxes we need to tick here or something? Or I think
I
think we like we went through it all in a roundabout way without asking questions, which is cool.
Yeah, I think. I want to ask you. I think about I really resonate with that story about you and your youth, little James. Let's call him. Do you feel like you belong now?
Yeah. I mean,
because you're like, I mean, it's wild. Like you show up in the skirts and you wear the gowns and you're like, I mean, I think you're pretty clearly heterosexual. I think you've kind of made that
100%
clarification in your own mind. You know, you're like as wild and out there probably as you've ever been, but more comfortable with yourself. Do you feel like you belong?
I think if I felt like I belong, then I would stop being radical. And I don't even know what the definition of belonging means, like by definition. But I feel like I am meant to be on this world and meant to be sitting across from you today. There's people that have made that possible because they believe in me and I love them very much. And yeah, a sense of belonging is, it's a tough one. That's a tough question. Why is that so tough for me to answer?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's part of the journey that you're on is figuring out where you are on that spectrum. Certainly it's the themes throughout your life. There was this sense that you felt like you didn't belong.
Yeah.
You know, what am I? Who am I? What am I? Where do I fit in? Why don't I fit in this box neatly? Why do I resonate with that over there when it doesn't seem to sort of fit the paradigm of the world that we live in? And now you are really quite unapologetically you. Yeah. And yet maybe still that idea of like, do I belong or do I care is an ongoing inquiry, right?
Yeah, and I guess I said at the beginning I wasn't going to talk about it, and maybe that's why, is because what I have built in my career for the last few years in the restaurants and my face of those and working, and work was always what I put everything into. And, you know, I walked away from my day-to-day life in all of those restaurants and still remain with Pretty Not Bad and will continue to give to that group of unconventional hospitality because I love all the staff and all the people that are there. But yeah, I'm in a huge transition where, maybe that's why.
That's awesome though.
Because it is awesome. And I'm starting again at 40, and I'm not starting again. I'm continuing the next journey of my life.
You're taking a right turn.
Path. Yeah. And that's probably why it's so hard to answer that question, because there's so many uncertainties. But I am exactly where I need to be, and I will continue to live openly and finding what the future brings every single day, and continue to show up for myself. So, I guess that question is a continued journey to belong into whatever is next. But I'm very proud of where I am today. So
thank you. That was a really honest answer.
Yeah.
And I actually, I have a couple more questions. Okay. I know. I'll wrap it up. I promise. But I find this conversation fascinating. Yeah, I didn't know the origin of. So for those of you that may be listening that are not from the Central Okanagan, you may not be familiar, but James was one of the founders of Pretty Not Bad.
Yeah.
Which is it is a very popular establishment here in Kelowna. I didn't know the origins of the name. I just thought it was clever, but I didn't tell me about Pretty Not Bad. Where does that come from?
Yeah, and Pretty Not Bad comes from conversation with my business partner around it. And now it's to create conversation. But how are you feeling today? I'm okay. I'm fine. That's how people but if I responded Pretty Not Bad, it's going to start a conversation.
Yeah, and see, I love that. I didn't know that was the origin story of that name, is like Pretty Not Bad.
Yeah, there's different origins maybe before, but that's what we created it into, was to create conversation. How are you feeling? Pretty Not Bad. He's going to chuckle, give you a smile, going to start conversation.
Yeah.
And so there's pink lights, there's rooms are every different. There's, in one bathroom, Dennis Rodman's wearing a skirt and another guy in a cheetah jacket. Can't remember his name. People will kill me. But then there's also a mental health bathroom that has Anthony Bourdain straight in front of you when you walk in, and to the left, Ted Lasso, which, shout out that I think season 4 is coming back. But that was one of the first shows I remember that actually talked about topics that people wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And talked about mental health and talked about struggles. And, you see a woman who's cheating on her man with a woman, like all of these topics that actually, I think, started conversation. Mm. And yeah.
Love it. I love it. Okay. One last question. So this podcast is called Wealthy.
Yeah.
It's sort of a play on words, or an entendre, basically meaning that our health is everything, mm-hmm. and that we only find true wealth or abundance by cultivating all these variable, nuanced aspects of our health, of which mental health is one of them, mm-hmm. physical health, connection, belonging, all of these things that contribute to our overall well-being. So the James that is sitting here today,
yeah.
What areas of your life do you feel wealthy or abundant?
Yeah, and I will say I grew up privileged, and I think I had the ability that I had anything I ever wanted as a child. My parents were very good. We lived in Monterey, California, lived in Oakville, lived in all these places, and now I live in Kelowna. And so to some, you're like, you have been given a privilege out of anyone else. And yes, I have, no question. I am fortunate to have where I am, but I've worked very hard to continue that fortune. Mm. And I've also felt the rock bottom, and I've worked up from there. So, I feel like I had to say that just for anyone that's, I don't know why. Anyways,
well, and I think the point is too, like, you can come from a wealthy or not. Okay, I shouldn't use that word because it's confusing, but you can come from a privileged background where you have a good home and a good family and still experience mental health struggles.
100%. And I guess that I now live life for experiences, and I have built my life around that, and really being present in those things to like understand the journey that you're on. And that's positive and negative. Just like the taxi cab's door that I slammed last night because he wouldn't drive us. Anyways. You learn something from that. So my wealth is a wealth of knowledge that I will share if someone wants to listen, but I will also take in. And my wealth has been different in the sense of like, it's not all monetary anymore.
Exactly.
And once I've realized that, I am a better person for myself and for others. And yeah, so wealthy, as you put it, is healthy. I'm healthy. I am the healthiest I've been. I'm active. I can do things that I never did before. But yeah, I have a wealth of knowledge that is for me and for the well-being of others if they need it, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I hope to be financially okay one day again, but I will. And we put so much on that. Mm-hmm. And so I know that this podcast is not about money, and that's not what you have there, because there is more to life than that. Yeah. And when you look at the rich and famous, or you look at what everyone's putting in front, it's not reality. And you can, I got the job that paid me what I wanted, and when I got it, I didn't want it. So there's more to life than money, and getting that is not what makes you happy. Acceptance of yourself and feeling how it hurts to not have it, and how, this one hurt me because yesterday I saw someone walking on the street going up to whatever we call that rail trail there. And, you can tell that they're just freshly into that world. And I've seen her in a different life. I don't know her name. I don't know what it is, but I know that she's she got to that place because that's the only thing that they have. And that's sad in itself. And I don't even know how to even fix that. And I don't think anyone does. And that's why I circle back to the children, and where, you know, when I see little ones running around, and that's where I try to focus my energy on, because they are impressionable to be able to change. And it starts with the kids to be able to do this. And there's some things that you won't be able to change. Mm-hmm. And I can't change poverty. I can't change that gal that is freshly to living that life. But I think if we talk about it and we share with our kids and others, then hopefully those things will start to diminish.
And it's like you said, you can't change the world until you change yourself first.
For sure.
Like, you start close to home.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't ask you any questions, but
you're not supposed to.
Okay,
that's not how this goes.
Okay.
Maybe one day you can come back and ask me all the questions. But
okay. Thanks,
it's been really refreshing to speak to you. I think that we invite a lot of folks onto this podcast that are in healthcare, either clinicians or physicians, but it is really, really important that we give the voice also to people with lived experience like yourself. And so I really appreciate your candidness.
Yeah.
I find that I think you're finding your voice in this new journey that you're on, being a mental health advocate. I think it's charming and relatable.
Yeah.
And I hope you continue to do this work, because I do think that you will have an impact. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think lastly, a shout out to all those clinical people and all those that have spent many, many days and years getting to where they have in the medical field, for all of that, what they're doing day in and day out. Because I never had I probably had the ability, but never had the drive to do that. And there's a lot of people that are doing some really cool things on a much higher scale to help the mental health. And I think that's admirable. So yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today,
Thanks for
James.
having me. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks.